sustainable and energy efficient technologies. And I'm so pleased that we are also now announcing tonight for the first time the creation of the Sedona Institute, which is a program of and that this program will be happening and located here in the community of Sedona. So thank you for all being here for that. Tonight's program is called Planetary Change, Mayan Calendar, and the Four Earth Mandates. We all know that we are in great times of transition now, and the planet is changing very rapidly in some sectors, climactically, but also socially, spiritually, intellectually, academically, throughout the entire continuum. And I've asked my dear friends tonight to come from a very long distance, Mindahi Bastida and his wife, Geraldine Encina. Thank you so much for joining us. And together with Doctors JJ and Desiree Hurtak, who will be presenting tonight's program. I'd like to briefly introduce Mindahi Bastida as Otomi Toltec, tribal member from Mexico, from the area of Tulipec and Lake Tawaka, and also that he is working with the Kogi peoples in an organization called the Council of the Eagle and the Condor. And I'm going to let Mindahi talk to you about that and the Four Earth Mandates. Geraldine, also a PhD academic like her husband, is an expert in the Mayan chronology and calendar, and in fact discovered that the 13th Baku did not end on 12/21/12 as was proclaimed, but in fact the scientists and the academics did not understand how the Mayans saw leap year, and it was May the 3rd, 2013. And today is May the 3rd, 2022. I'm told by Geraldine that that began a 13-year transition to May the 3rd, 2026, from the 13th to the 14th of, and we're now at the end of year number 9 today. And to the program. And I'm going to let Geraldine explain the rest to you regarding that matter. Dr. J.J. Hurtak and his lovely wife, Desiree, have been, as most of you all know, teaching the Keys of Enoch in the community of Sedona and all around the world since 1973. Thank you, Dr. Hurtak. J.J. Hurtak, Dr. Hurtak represents the United Nations here today officially, and wears the that is called a
teaching belt.
The teaching belt of the Shavanti people of
Mato Grosso, Brazil.
Mato Grosso, Brazil. And so, and is an honorary chief of that tribe. So tonight's program is focused on the indigeneity of the planet, of all of us. If we go back far enough, everybody is indigenous. And I just want to briefly go through the Four Earth Mandates, which are predicated on the fact that we have forgotten our original instructions. And that the first mandate states that we must recognize the spiritual authority of indigenous people. And then the second mandate states that we must make payments to sacred sites around the world and recognize the spirituality of these sites and the entities that dwell there, including here in our own Sedona. And the third mandate to establish 13 houses of original thought, to transmit the information of the elders to the younger around the fire, very important concept. And the fourth is to work in collaboration to achieve the first three, to remember our original instructions. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mindahi Bastida, who will talk to us about his work. Thank you all for coming.
The place that was for was an island where the most people really was born and the longest one in the country. The valley was named La Lata, the Valley of the Moon. And then it was in the last century that we suffered. Not just because of the time, because it was growing correctly. They took the water from the aquifer from Kogi, and then many animals perished. I saw how the fish went up and up. The last day returned in the river. And now there's nothing. My community was named San Pedro. My mother's family who came in the earlier 16th century named San Pedro because it's so how people were fishing. In the name of the San Pedro for the fisher, he was named in my community like that. And right before, my community was speaking Aztec language. So, as you can see, there is a transition of the people in the world. So that's very important to remember who we are. I think that that's the most crucial in that who we are. We can know where we go. Because who we are is not just the human family. It's also the volcano, the second volcano, the second lake along the ground. It is also the second place that are around. We have a very, very secret tree that is called our Whitley. And all the American cores, when we are born, they are hanging in that sacred tree. And we all know. So we go to Salma, a beautiful place and a sanctuary, not Catholic. I mean, we go because there are sacred caves for us. Those sacred caves, we receive instructions. And we receive also information. How to work. It was in 1996 when we carried out Planetary because the lake was full. And then the community came up and the lake was recovered through prayer. So we see that prayer is also very powerful and important and it works. But prayer is not enough. We have to carry out research about how the ecosystem and the social compound these people were asked by the Interstellar Zone and by the Mexico City. So we have to understand how the policies, the national policies, were impacting our territory. And that's how we were able to protect through very initial studies to protect the wetlands for the rivers war. So that's my story. That's who I am. I am in recovery. I am recovering myself. My family, my community. It was in 1996. He was invited in London, Ontario. You did? Invited by these beautiful people in London, Ontario. I was very young, but some of them came from Central America and North America. And we were around to the fire, sharing prophecy. And this sharing, I can tell you that there were prophecies that we were sharing from people to peoples. And I heard this holy prophecy of the rock, in the rock, on the rock. That humanity was walking like almost 8,000 years ago. We were walking together with other beings. And then there was like why people who kept walking in that path and people who went in another direction. So that's the history of humanity. Instead of taking care, they began to take over. And that's what history of human being. And that's the reason we have this civilizational crisis and this ecological and climate crisis. Because we have misbehaved. We have gone away from the original instructions. We have gone away from living with Mother Earth to live from Mother Earth. We went from the cooperation to competition. That's what is killing us. I'm talking about human beings in general. And in original and peoples, we are not exempt. We are being touched. That's what is called modernity, or civilization. This is a very sad story. But I can tell you that some people have kept going in the same path. And that's the very reason that we have 80% of our biocultural diversity, not just biodiversity, biocultural diversity, because we don't distinguish nature and culture. They are intertwined. That's the reason the concept biocultural heritage, biocultural diversity together. So 80% of biocultural diversity is in original nations' territories, around the world. As you can see, we have something to offer to the world. It was in 1992 when I was in the so-called Air Summit in Rio de Janeiro. I was representing the Latin American youth, but also the original nations and peoples representation. It was the first time that human knowledge was acknowledged for the survival of this planet. But also it was the first time that three international regimes were signed. You know, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Convention on Climate Change, and the Convention of Desertification. But 1992 is far away now, and we have now the celebration of Stockholm Plus 50. It's coming 3rd and 4th of June. I ask you, do we live better than those days? We are not better. Do we have better quality of water, of air, of soil, energies? We don't. We are in a very, very profound crisis. But we know that there's people all over the world that are doing a very good work. They are continuing and they are recovering. Dignity and culture, spirituality. That's what is going to keep us in this world alive and is positive. In the year 2013, I was called by UNESCO to write a paper about the protection of sacred sites around the world. Because we saw how sacred sites were being destroyed, also desecrated and destroyed. And for all other animals, were dangerous because they are the source of energy that give us the life that we have. Very important, the sacred sites. We must protect sacred sites. But they were calling the spiritual reserves. We don't want to talk about reserves anymore because they must be reserved for surveillance. They have to be free, and to be in touch with them. So in 2013, we were called by the Kogi, the Huasco Carbon in the Sierra Nevada, in Santa Marta. 150 spiritual leaders we were there for a week, eating special food, your natural food, praying day and night. And we were sitting in special rooms. We were receiving special messages. Through divination, several techniques, the whole we were telling us, and the good one. So we signed the declaration of the Mack Declaration that we can share with you. But these 4 mandates, the so-called 4 pillars, we were given in a secret way. And the first mandate talks about honoring and respecting the spiritual authority of original nations and people. That's the first mandate. Humanity must acknowledge the spiritual authority of original nations and people. The ones who have kept the original story. And that's through the establishment of the councils, the Grand Council, and and the Council of Digon and the Congo, the Council of F-13, representing all continents, and the Grand Council of 52, representing all various regions of the world, including the languages, the poles, the voice that has been lacking in the legislative process and in the world. We begin 2013 to 2026, 13 years of cleansing. So the second mandate is the protection and reactivation of the sacred sites. And for that, we have to go through the main major sacred sites, Mount Fuji, Mount Etna, Mount Blanca here in the Four Corners area. But we are entering to the second phase and their third phase, because we have to go to Ulm in Australia, Kailash. We have to go to Kilimanjaro in Africa. We have to go to Mount Tata, to Canal in Peru. We have to go also to that is being called calling north, the White Lion in South Africa. Because the animals are speaking, they are calling to go and pay respect and make payments, make offerings to the places. And there's a message from that, and we must recover ancestral pilgrimages to the all over the world. And that's the reason we were given these 2 weeks. Walk to the church. So that's something that you must remember, because it's a mandate that has been given in a sacred way. I'm just passing the list. The third mandate, and I mean, trying to be very concise, is about the building and construction and establishment of the houses of original thought, houses of original thinking, or spiritual houses, where the fire is at the center and everyone is around, listening to the elders. Listening to the elders is not just the elders from the original children. Elders who know something how to transmit wisdom and exchange that with around this house. So we have already 3. We are almost the 4th one. One in Colombia, in Sapaima. The other one in the Mayan land, in Yucatan. The other one in Finca Sagrada, south of Ecuador, and the other one in Mexico, in Central America. So we need really support to build those houses. First, this continent, and then in other continents. The main element is the fire, because the fire teaches us, and it's like a glue. When we want to speak some serious things and around wisdom, fire has to be present. Otherwise, it just, it just when we go around the fire teaches us how to wait and flourish for the sacred wisdom. So that's the reason we were taught, we were said about it. Even at houses, when you have something, please put always at least a candle or make a fire. So that's the third mandate. The whole third mandate is intercultural dialogue, intercultural exchange. We must be exchanging not just ideas, but products. Products that are natural, not intelligence. Products that can give us life, not death. And it's not easy because the soil in many places is poison. So we need to recover first of all oil and then produce. And we can do it. There are several techniques. And the intercultural exchange is not just at the local level, as I was telling you, it's at the international level. We need to be at the human dialogue. For whatever is being decided, we need to be there to take decisions as well. Or at least to have voice. Because original nations and people, we don't have a vote in that people. But we have a vote. We have some people who are relaxed and are speaking for us, are speaking for whatever. Things are changing. And I want to change more. So this intercultural dialogue is highly needed, but we need to understand each other once again. So, brothers and sisters, this is the fourth earth mandate. Very simple, a lot of work. So I'm very happy to be here with you this beautiful afternoon here in Sedona. And I can feel that this place is something is emerging, like in many other communities. So, you know, this work of regeneration is highly important because we need to regenerate ourselves. We need really to put our lives to work. The most precious thing, the care of life. We believe in the Otomi Toltec wisdom that we came to this beautiful planet to take care of life as a generation. So if we are not doing that, just slow down, stop, and reverse the damage you have done for your organization, your institute. Whatever you have done, you need to pay back. You can pay back. And to recover dignity and humanity. And recover. As I say in other times, all what we have done, but talents are not gifts, they are responsibilities. If you have talent and you want offer, then serve. It's not really important. Sooner or later, you are going to see that you have to go back and develop what you were given as a responsibility. So thank you very much for this big opportunity to be together. Thank you.
And I just want to tell everybody that it's such a blessing for me to be here with Mindahi and listen to those words because of the time that it is. And I'll just reiterate that, as Mindahi says, to quote, these are the times, and the time is now. These are the times, and the time is now. I'd like to bring up Geraldine, and please join up here at the front, Geraldine. And Geraldine is Mapuche and Celtic, and she is from Chile, and is going to introduce a wonderful film that you produced that elucidates on the Mayan calendar. Thank you.
So I'm really honored to be here and so happy that this community is flourishing here in Sedona. I think that in this crowd, most of you have heard about some kind of chronology regarding the Maya calendar. Probably Arguelles and many others. And I got a question this morning, which was, well, and why is it that the Maya, or even back the Olmec, were, working around time in such a rigorous way and determined way? And to me, it's really clear, but it's taken me the lifetime of my children to figure it out, which is 20 years, 17 years. It's because for anyone back, let's say 8,000 years ago, unless you were keeping track of the seasons, you're keeping track of the rains and the time for the onset of the rainy season, unless you were observing the stars and the moon and relating how they were also influencing and determining the arrival of the rain, then there would be no crops. And there was no crops, there was no continuation of human life, and no opportunity to celebrate, this community that is all my relations between human beings, stars, and earth beings. So once that enough observation was carried out, there was like a recognition that Venus, evening Venus, had a role, that Pleiades had a role, the Southern Cross had a role, and the Olmecs, which is who really put the long count calendar system in place, were able to calculate what event in the future would keep them connected to the most beautiful event of the year cycle, which is the onset of the rainy season. That day is May 3. And there's particular configurations in the sky that ensure that we will be able to keep track of May 3. So the Olmec said, we want to ensure that our civilization will always thrive. We want to ensure that our civilization, the children of the corn, can, bring in the rains, connect with the rainy deities, and that they will never forget that they need to do the ceremonies on May the 3rd. So for that, we are going to create this long count system whereby at the closing of 13 Baktun cycles, each Baktun is approximately 400 years. So at the closing of 13 of these Baktun, which is less than 5,200 years, the combination of that would happen on an A3. Yes? And not only that needed to be in place, but evening Venus had to be emerging from the waters, or about to emerge from the waters. And moon had to be accompanying that process of birthing of evening Venus. And so also be there at that onset of the rainy season. So when all of that configuration was calculated into the future, it was decided that that moment that Mindahi would be linked to 2013. Yes? So the conclusion of 13 Bactun would be then. And then they worked their time backwards for those almost 5,200 years and arrived to July the 27th of 3,117 before our year. So we've been told for many, many times that it's 3,114, that beginning time. But it's 3 years back before that. So there's an explanation for that, and it has to do with the amount of leap days that these scientists that have been trying to reconstruct the chronology just made one assumption about how these 4 quarter days extra that happen every year. You know how we go around the sun and it takes us 365 days and a quarter. Yeah? And in the linear system that we're being forced to walk along, we just pile up those 4 quarters and build 1 leap day after 4 years. Yes? And so what we're going to watch now is the original Mesoamerican manner of including that last quarter day. And you're going to see that it's ritual, and for the quarter day ritual did not need to actually count a whole leap day to keep the calendar and the beginning of the year aligned with the sun. So because of that, the original location of the beginning of 13 Bactun was back in, like I said, July 27th of 3117. And that is, for those who have been trying to follow some calendar system of the Mayan, it may resonate. July 26th, 27th is one of the proposals for a beginning of the year cycle, but in fact, it's the date of the anniversary of creation. Every time we arrive to the 26th of July, eve of 27th of July, it's a new additional year of the creation moment. And that's why it's still pulsating in the Yucatan Peninsula. It's a date to be celebrated. And you'll see in the little 12-minute movie that the beginning of the Mayan year is actually August the 13th. And August the 13th has its unique manner of manifesting itself. It's appearing in so many pyramids. There's the alignment to the sunset of the August 13th. And it is in one of the quarters of the world. Obviously, we've got the 4 solstice and equinox dates that we all know by heart: 21st of March, 21st of June, 22nd of September, and 21st of December. We know know those off by heart. And then there's another square cross in between those dates, which is the 12th of February, the 3rd of May, August the 13th, and November the 1st, or October the 31st. Having said all that, and hoping that some of the threads, like you can relate to this, I want to say again that if there was one thing that was moving the Olmecs to build all this chronological system, it was just making sure that the rains would come back. You know, that there would be enough to harvest by November time. And one last thing that I'll say is that there was a need to ensure that there was, like, all the instructions were being followed, the original instructions, and that there was like these holders of the four corners and the center doing their work to harmonize the passing of time and to harmonize the relations between men and women and to ensure the responsibility of each human being. When I say that, alongside the 365-day calendar system that was developed by the North American, there was a 260-day system. Yes? And we were all born into one of these 260 days. And with that comes a responsibility. And many of you maybe have been like holding on to one of those days because someone read it for you, you're too eagle, or you know, any of those days that show up when a calculation is made or your birthday. Unfortunately, for the past 527 years, that calculation has been misread, and so, you know, we are at a very, very relevant moment whereby all of the past constructs, you know, which have been colonizing constructs of timekeeping, of the 29th of February calculation system that may have been put in place by the Native American ancestors. All these myth constructs need to be released, put aside, and so part of the rebirthing is to get all this back right. So calculating again, what's your birth date? You want to vibrate with that pulsation that for more than 5,000 years, first the Olmec, then the Otomi Toltec, and the Maya, and the Mexica, they have always been aligned with those pulses coming from the universe. And it's only been in the past 500 years that we misaligned ourselves. Those who were timekeeping, as soon as they were presented with this European calendar, even the timekeepers in Guatemala, very sadly, started to name February 29 and then get all their rituals like put, backwards and out of alignment. So this is a very precious time, and we have in this 13-year period between the closing of the 13th Baktu and transitioning into the 14th Baktu that have already begun, but we're just doing all this cleansing, doing all this releasing of constructs that have not worked for the past 400, 500 years, and preparing ourselves for the 14th Baktu. And we only have 4 years left We're today, May 3, we're 9 years into the 13 years that we are given to do the homework. By 2026, on May 3, if we have done, and those who have done the homework, we'll be able to actually help one of the trees that has fallen and is keeping the horizontal surface of the world out of balance. There's so much that has been happening since 2013 that has been keeping us like with the sensation that all the elements are like just doing their thing and wrestling and and it's because we're in this purification time. So for those who are going to be able to help this tree that has let go, there's 4 standing trees when everything is working right. Like I said, one of them is now fallen, and we will have to do that ceremony to raise that tree. And hopefully we're like ready to take on the responsibility to live in this 14 facility, which is going to be, really challenging, but if we've done the work, it will be much lighter of a work. Okay, so having said that, let's go and watch this little movie, and then I think that it will be, just moving on with the microphone, and then after all of that, we'll get our keys.
Clear conception of time will always perceive a unidirectional flow into the distant future for no end. A different conception of time explains how you fickle, meaning there is always a return to the beginning. In this short presentation, we will walk you through the original mind talent system and explain why, for the past 500 years, it has been misinterpreted by Western scholars as being incorrect. It is important to understand that all calendar systems were based on the sun's movement across the horizon. A tropical year, also known as the solar year, represents the time taken by the Earth to complete one revolution around the sun. It is well known among astronomers. This cycle takes almost 365.25 days. In 600 BC, the Olmec civilization was creating the foundations of a Mayan calendar from Earth. It chose August 13th as the first day of the new year for astronomical significance. Many of the Mayan pyramids are aligned to represent the spring and fall equinox, and of course, the new year, August the 13th. The Maya built their pyramids to mark the movement of time organically, based on the precise movement of the sun. For example, on August 13th, the sun is right in the middle of the sky in one of the oldest Mayan pyramids. On this single day, a perfect square cross alignment is attained in relation to the position of the sun at sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight. This perfect cross alignment represents the time-space conception, which is the very core of the Mesoamerican civilization. This astronomical event is what identifies the first day of the new year for the Maya. The GPE correlation is based on sun cycle circuit, an indigenous conception that values and recognizes the sun's journey through a complete day cycle, which includes sunrise, noon, sunset, and midnight days. By honoring the movement of the sun through each of these sun cycles, an entire awareness of the sun's presence is accounted for, even at night. Western scholars have only considered the beginning of a full day cycle at midnight, and therefore does not have a conception of days starting alternatively at sunrise, noon, or sunset. Western scholarship of Mayan timekeeping do not acknowledge the role of the year bearers, who have been depicted in many epigraphic and iconographic Mesoamerican contexts. For centuries, these year bearers have been overlooked and ignored. Their role has not been fully understood until now. It does not need to implement these years in their calendar system because they understood that each year bearer performs the passage of the last quarter day by means of their cardinal sign, passing on the year to the next year bearer. Since colonial contact, Western scholars have declared that the Mayan calendar lagged because it did not include or account for a quarter day at the end of each calendar year. This incorrect assumption was made because Western scholarship of Mesoamerican calendars completely missed the whole point and premise of the 4 year bearers. For indigenous timekeepers, each of the 4 year bearers worked for an entire year cycle, day by day, or piece by piece. East, the Kaban year bearer counts sunrise days. In the north, the east year bearer reckons the noon days. In the west, Manik year bearer keeps track of sunset days. And in the south, F year bearer counts midnight days. Each year bearer performs the task of ritually passing the hop, the year, to the next year bearer, which brings life. In east, the Kaban year bearer keeps track of every sunrise for 365 days. Then he ritually passes the hop, the year, to the east year bearer in the north. This passing of the hop is performed in ritual time, thereby absorbing the passing of the quarter day in ceremonial time. East in the north keeps track of every new day beginning at noon for 365 teams or days, and then moves the hop, the year, to Manik in the west. Manik in the west accounts for each new day from sunset. After 365 sunset teams or days, Manik moves the year to F in the south. F year bearer accounts for all midnight teams or days. Again, 1 quarter day of ritual time is included with the passing of the half the year. After 4 years of each year bearer performing its duty in ceremonial time, a full ritual day is completed. A new 4-year cycle begins again when the Kaban year bearer takes its seat for 365 teams or days, beginning at sunrise. This 4-year cycle continues until the Batum cycle is completed. In Western conceptions of time, days only begin at midnight. But early Mayans and Mesoamerican timekeepers have figured out another system that accounts for days beginning at different times during the Earth's revolution around the sun. The Mayan calendar does not need to include a leap year every 4 years because it accounts for every last quarter day in ritual time. And that helps to push the starting of the day cycle further ahead and therefore corrects its solar alignment upon the 4th year. For Western scholars, the quarter days appear to be missing precisely because they were ritual time. This is what Western scholarship could never figure out. The inability to comprehend or unwillingness to respect the role of the year bearers has interfered with the measuring system of peak days on the long count used by Olmec and later Mayan astronomers. This misunderstanding has not only distorted the concept of the long count, but has also misrepresented the beginning of creation, calculated by the Olmecs and articulated by the Mayans. By freeing the team day at the end of every fourth year from being a leap day, the long account has expressed the 13 Baku, and which holds 1,872,000 team days, totaled more than 5,128 years instead of the conventional 5,125 years. So many team days freed from being a leap day represent over 3 years in the 13 Baku cycle. All this explains why the starting date calculated by Western scholars missed the significant astronomical event of Venus and the Moon. The predominance of Venus and the Moon in the ancient Mayan books helped Dr. Geraldine Encina uncover that 8 of creation days must be related to an important astronomical event in which Venus and the Moon were significantly implicated. The introductory passage on page 51A of the Dresden Codex describes Venus, Lama, rising out of the water 8 days after creation. Kova Stele 1 tells that on the 8th moon was waning crescent, and so it followed that moon rose on the west 8 days later. From an astronomical standpoint, it was understood by indigenous timekeepers that once Venus and the moon returned to their starting point on creation day, the 13 Baku cycle would be completed. The description of Venus and Moon under the water at the starting of 13 Baku means that they were also under the water at the closing of the cycle. On May 3rd, 2013, the Moon and Venus completed this cycle, marking the actual closing of the long count 13 Baku cycle. Erroneous calculations proposed by Western scholars marks December 21st, 2012 as the end of the Mayan long count calendar, but they were wrong. The Moon and Venus were aligned again for the very first time since creation. This astronomical event not only reconciles creation time, but more significantly proves that Mesoamerican timekeepers were accurate and precise and truly centuries ahead of their time. Thank you very much. And would you like to conclude some remarks of what we just thought?
Well, is there any pressing question or? Yes.
Calculation of the days. It would be a quarter, it would sometimes be in the middle, like a noon, and sometimes it might be sunset, sometimes midnight, and that's how the quarter goes. So
Get absorbed thanks to this sequence of 365 sunrise days, followed by 365 noon days, followed by 365 sunset days, followed by 365 midnight days, and all over again.
thank you so much, and What do we know about what happened during that ceremonial time?
Well, there is reminiscence and practice even today, until today, in many communities. If you go to the Yucatan Peninsula, you will see people celebrating on the 15th of August. They have their 4 patron saints. They are combinations of the Catholic, elements. So there will be Virgen de la Candelaria, Virgen de la Asunción. So the Ascension Virgin that is celebrated in August. Hello? Yeah. Okay. So I was asked about if there's any evidence that this ritual would be happening today, and yes, there is. So, for instance, in Choquén, in the Yucatan Peninsula, there's a celebration that happens on the 15th of August. And that is totally in alignment with what is there in the ethnography of the 1500s, about there being an opening of the year on the day 2 of the month. And day 2 of the month, counting from day 0 of the month, is on August 15th, from the August 13th. And what they did today is that they move around 4 patron saints from the Catholic tradition. One of them is Virgen de la Asunción, Virgin of the Ascension, whose date is August 15th. So, and they all do their little dance and like move in this manner. But they are replicating something because the tradition says it must be done on that day. But the mathematical chronological reason is not there anymore. So the community will not say, okay, so now the patron saint that's working this year is on the east. Therefore, we shall count our days starting at sunrise. They don't do that any longer. They just keep on with, starting at midnight, Western system. So there's that, and then Santiago Adibla in Guatemala, there's also celebration. They do it around Máximo and in the day of Santiago. So again, Santiago is the 24th of July. And that originally is the beginning of the second month. To celebrate, it's the big feast of the man. There's a small feast of the man on July 4th. And that's when the opening of the Tutuhil and Tute year is originally on the 4th of July, with the celebration to the small feast to the man. And then the big feast, like I said, is 24th of July. It's correlated to the saint, and then there's a whole festivity around Santiago. The understanding of why that is has been lost. Today in Santiago de Plan, people will be celebrating because of all the leap days that have been accumulating since the late 1500s. Then it's no longer the beginning of July, the 4th of July, the opening of the year. That opening of the year has gone back so much, over 130 days, placing the beginning back in March. So that's pretty sad because each month actually speaks about what's happening in nature. There's a month that speaks about the winged ants. It's originally located in May, which is the time when ants develop wings. However, now this is like backwards in December time. So if, there was enough workshops, there was enough work with local people that I've been trying to generate those spaces and fill on the workings of that, it requires, time, dedication, commitment, and enough listeners who will like get it, and then they, in their language, will open the workshop to appropriate this, which is our original ancestral knowledge, understanding about nature and cycles.
I have a question.
So we're gonna have.
The dynamic,
Here,
yes.
we need to-
Oh, okay.
If you don't mind, thank you so much. And that's, I want Dr. Patrick Encina. Thank you so much for your brilliant look at the system that we had up. And so we'll get into that a little bit later. Please remember your questions for later on this evening. And I'd like to now ask Drs. Hurtak's to come up to this front here. And would you like to present seated or? Okay. Here we go. We can get this mic operation. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good job.
You're not here, Geraldine. This is very gathering.
Desiree and I are political scientists, archaeologists, futurists, and remote sensing specialists. That is to say, the use of airborne radar as well as competent radar to look at the sacred heritage of the world that Mindahi has spoken about. We've been involved with this for 49 years, and we've just completed a study in Egypt with the sound structure of the pyramids that ironically match the sound structure of the Mayan pyramids. It's a peninsula. The work was published in the scientific periodical Archaeologia in Mexico City by Enoch in 2017, which is a systematic look at the fact of the sound geometries, or scientists would call acoustical physics, as being the basis for why these pyramids are built as sociological, psychological, and spiritual chronometers.
So you're going to see some of the alignments that are unique with these pyramids, but it's also interesting to realize that they are aligned to stars, and they're also aligned and vibrate certain sounds. Tikal, that's Guatemala, but still was the ancient Mayan culture, actually had, it's called the city of sound. And you could be way up on top of one of those pyramids, and yet someone standing at the very base of the pyramid in the center of the quadrangle would actually be able to hear you just talking normally. I mean, they understood vibrations
We
clearly.
conducted experiments in 1981, and when I began to chant or use the mantras of the ancient languages, a vibratory field was activated and beams of light came down over the second temple in the archaeological zone, Tikal, which means music. This was analyzed by Seba Badachi, famous European musicologist, and they agreed that there was a paraphysical soundscape that the ancients used to awaken the soul, which we call the sleepy nature of humans who had to step into the sacred. So pyramids were, should we say, symbols of sacred areas where the human would meet the divine, and the divine would meet the human. The divine-human partnership is what is at stake right now with Mother Earth going through all of these changes, which require a delicate balance.
So we're going to go quickly through some of these slides. Our time is short tonight, but basically we're talking about planetary change and the blueprint of the ancients. And, this is how we really see, this is the main pyramid at Chichen Itza, and it's vast. It's amazing. It's,
How many steps is right?
yeah, no, it actually counts, again, the 365 cycle.
40 years, count still.
364 and then one. And let's go to the next one, just to take a look. Yeah, so this is what's underneath. Now, why would you ever build a huge, complex pyramid? Anyone who's an an architect or even a designer would never build it above water. This is a cenote, within like 500 feet. But they built this entire pyramid over water because they understood the energy that's connected with the power of water.
We understand through our work with Marcel Vogel with IBM that the water molecule has a certain spin orientation in certain bodies of water under certain conditions of heat
and vibration and create a vortex of energy that pulsates through the pyramid structure itself, and under unique conditions, added to the sound waves of the human voice or high participation by the society, distant communication is achieved, higher states of consciousness are elevated, and what we would call the paraphysical gifts, the ability to heal people, to see briefly into the future, all of these higher mental possibilities come alive.
Right, and everyone knows the work of Emoto. In fact, Alan and us did his first lecture ever in New York City to a great audience. But in addition to that, Tesla, actually, if you ever look at his transiting towers, the one he built in Warncliffe and also in other locations, he always wanted water. He said it was going to dissipate the energy, like to get that power out, but he always had water underneath his transmission tower. The next.
So, what happened 2 years ago, people of the academy were meditating, and all of a sudden, a beam of light came down over the Chichen Itza pyramid. I was thinking of what happened to the children of Israel when they left Egypt. This is a real picture.
Yeah.
It shocked the government people in Mexico. They were being put on alert that the human civilization was being watched by intelligent life forms. Now we're beginning to see the rest of the story from what is now being echoed throughout the world by releases of information from the US Pentagon, as well as from the British, the Australian, Brazilian, Mexican government called disclosure. Disclosure means we're not alone in the universe. And so we're seeing the vitality of what these Mayan pyramids are all about. The most sophisticated mathematical system dealing with infinity of the ancient world is precisely on target for what we believe to be the moving of the human clockwork into the cosmic awareness that we're part of a much larger family of nations.
And if you want to see more about this, Jaime Balsan, Millennial, has this. It was taken by a cell phone. A guy was shooting his 2 kids. They had the shot before, they had this shot, and they have the time, date, everything. The shot before did not have the pillar, the shot with the 2 kids right there. This one has it.
So Desiree and I did mathematics and musical structures in Egypt. Remember, the exodus of the children of Israel out of Egypt was pyramids. The pillars of light, they came down. That's not mythology. That is higher science coded in mythological symbols.
It's energizing the reality. And I think people are seeing orbs, similar reality. Can I have next? So this is some of our work. As you can see, we actually went into various chambers. We did Chichen Itza, we did Palenque, this is Uxmal, and we actually recorded the sound frequencies.
You can see the profile of the energy field, and with the use of sweeps of white noise and pink noise, we're able to get clarification of the actual energy blueprint. And we have it here, we will call a vibratory pyramid within a pyramid. This is that Chichen Itza by just 117 Harris.
But it also goes up to, we have a lot of F sharp, A sharp, and also C sharp. But F sharp, A sharp are some of the key vibratory frequencies that we recorded both in Mexico, and again, printed a formal article for the National Archaeological Organization there, and we're doing one to compare it to Egypt right now.
So to put it simply, in the West, we've been made tone deaf. We have overlooked the genius of musicology as well as mathematical frequencies in sacred geometry that the ancients used throughout the world in no less than 12 different areas. This is illustrated in my book, Keys of Enoch, published in 1973. For example, at Tula, in the year 2000, Tulum, I was chanting ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and Sanskrit expressions, and I asked for a sign that this was a sacred area. First, the pyramidal structures are behind me, and suddenly a beam of light, someone called a shield of light, a purposive energy field, went around my body. It was so strong that my translator was literally knocked off his position next to me. A man was taking a picture of his wife in the foreground, and I was able to capture this in fractions of a second. So this is a demonstration of what happens in certain areas where you have sacredness, you have the right vibration, you enter in what is called metaphysically the body of light, you put on the garment of light, you begin to understand the association of what the ancients called the ascension process, realizing that we are all vibrations. And the way we modulate these vibrations determine who we are, where we're going, and where we've come from.
So what's also important is the star alignments. And this is, of course, still the Mayan. But if you go to the Aztec, they have a new fire ceremony every 52 years. They said if Venus shows up, then the world will continue. And then every 114, they double that. If Venus and also the Pleiades align, that's all part of this. So they really have this code structure. You
When we see it as right,
the next
we
one.
see the Pleiades. This is a very important sign because in my work with the Chavantes in Brazil, there's also the acknowledgement of the Pleiades as being one of the central cradles of cosmic civilization.
So this is from the Keys of Enoch, and that was published in the 70s, which I did that particular illustration based on Dr. Hurtak. And you can see, this is something, a rich structure, it actually goes all the way out, but we wanted to show you the comparison. And this is a kid, literally, who about 6 or 7 years ago, from French Canada, got Gaudery, he actually went to the Canadian Space Society, and he goes, look, I mean, he didn't take it from our book, I think he just had some insights or whatever. He has similar alignments to us, and he aligned every single pyramid to the stars.
Young man Gaudery was able to show the missing pyramids that exist that was not acknowledged.
Right, so he said, but one was missing, and it was connected with Orion, and he found it in like this area. And they actually sent satellites, of course, you need the satellites first to go find it. Yes, there was like a square platform that was unknown. Through the jungles, they were able to see that. So
in addition to the Pleiades, Orion was very important.
yeah,
For the
all
peoples
those
of Central and South America, and the Keys of Enoch said in 1973, long before Robert Lavelle and others, that the chambers in the Great Pyramid point to the belt of Orion in terms of the southern star shaft, representing the positive side of light. The other star shaft points to Rodwell or Draconis, representing the dragon or representing the negative spiral. So we have in decoded mythology this dialectic between the use of science and environmental knowledge to be in touch with Mother Earth and the ascension process, or be out of balance with Mother Earth, destroy Mother Earth and destroy civilizations. This is where we're at right now. We're close to environmental destruction, biosphere collapse, and according to my colleagues at the United Nations, well within 30 to 50 years of the destruction of much of humanity.
So some of you are familiar with the Lakota. This is a famous book, Lakota Star Knowledge. It's interesting, they have this Tayami, and I'm probably not pronouncing it as good as someone else. They place Orion in the center, and then they place the Pleiades on one side and actually Sirius on the other. Now,
This is showing us, the greater alignment that the indigenous of North America have, matching what is there in South America as well as in Egypt.
right, so in Egypt, right, you go, these are stellar alignments of shafts, what we call air shafts, or we call them star shafts. Actually, if you go from the Queen's chamber, there's a shaft that would go out towards Sirius. You go from the King's chamber, there's a star shaft. This is from 1973, Dr. Hurtak wrote about, and it's Orion now, of course, Rodwell and others have talked about it. And so you wonder where the Pleiades is. It must be on top in some sort of unique alignment. But, you know, these things are all coded. They're coded for the sun, the moon, the stars, and ultimately the entire chronology.
So the sacred areas of the Hopi Nation, we believe is preventing, I should say, suggesting a commentary that matches the Mayan calendar, preventing misunderstanding between the tribes and even the Europeans and the natives in what we will call the episode Gathering Tribes, bringing together planetary knowledge from all sides so that we can correct the calendar system and correct the misuse of science, which is object-oriented rather than human-oriented. So the simplification in different parts of the world is opening up the 13 sacred areas that Mindahi speaks of. This is very important. We have the social engineering, the technology, the musicologists working with us to do this in such a way that scientists have to, anthropologists have to, that a new page of history is before us.
So let's look at some comparisons. Well, this is actually Mexico City. This is
The Way of the Dead.
yeah, and this is Teotihuacan, which is it's interesting. So most people,
Teotihuacan with the gods and the humans and birds.
some people you know about for those of you who've been there, probably many of you have the pyramid of the Newton, the pyramid of the Sun. Okay, 2 pyramids, right? That's it? No, you actually have Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl, really the feathered serpent, we all know how important he was. We also think it actually has codes on the glyphs that are really interesting, but you can see the alignments. You have an alignment here. Also, this is, of course, Egypt. Similar alignments and similar alignments to the 3 stars of the belt.
Now we have this small pyramid.
Yeah, pyramid of the moon.
And the president of Mexico many years ago had me as his guest, Jose Portillo. He wrote a book on Quetzalcoatl, and he recognized that the whole symbolism of Quetzalcoatl was the feathered serpent that came in from the Pacific area that brought new knowledge to peoples of Mother Earth to open up the time balls of history. And again, having worked both in the Yucatan as well as in Giza under the ground, we were able to find the connecting linkages that have not really been known that provide the musicology, the mathematics, and this is important at the time of environmental change. The realization that the Egyptians were way ahead of Muslim cultures in the Middle East by the use of water hydraulics. Through the use of water hydraulics, Egypt became the breadbasket of the ancient world in the Near East.
And you guys have all heard of this, but I couldn't leave it out when we were here in Sedona. You know, why are there 3 mesas connected with the Hopi? Was there a reason? Is there an alignment? I think everything is mathematical, but behind mathematics is also consciousness. So the 3 alignments are very, very key in all that we're doing. Let's go to the next one. So just to go back a little bit, a very good friend of ours came out with a movie on this. It's the area of Balsaquillo near Puebla, Mexico, which is just really east by an hour or 2 drive from Mexico City. It's Huaylaco. I can't really do those too well. Dr. Hurtak, what are you?
Yes, in 1969, the anthropologist Cynthia Irwin Williams published with other colleagues their first paper, which dated stone tools in a stratum that also contained animal remains. Listen carefully. Radiocarbon dating of the animal remains produced an age of over 35,000 years before present. Uranium dating produced an age of 260,000 before present, plus or minus 60,000 years. Now, she was at Harvard University graduate. She was an outstanding female anthropologist who lost her position because she dared to say the county system was incorrect.
And the more we learn, the more we hear of new findings, the more it actually does go back to, we'll say at least the 35,000 years ago, at least. And even National Geographic did a whole study of the Yucatan. They believe anywhere from 2 million to 5 million people lived in the area at the time of Christ. And what happened to that? It wasn't the Spanish, unfortunately, who destroyed them. It was climate change.
Climate change is not what we have to face.
So actually,
National Geographic confirmed what we showed earlier in the map, the triangle in the Guatemala, the / Yucatan Peninsula area, that there was a massive civilization that one time did exist, which was equivalent to 1/3 of the population of Europe.
their water level went down to somewhere between 25 and 30% of normal, and that really was not able to sustain them. So just to take a look, here's a whole area, not far from, well, it's closer to Barstow, Lancaster area, and this is Lake Mannix. They believe they're finding tools 18,000 to 20,000 years before present, and the Calico early man also there much earlier. There were also mastodon bones that are now in a museum in San Diego that they believe is like 150,000 years ago. The mastodon bones were late.
So we're much older as a species. There was an earlier cycle that was recorded by the indigenous people, and we're now beginning to decode these calendar systems, not of North America, South America, but throughout the world.
What's interesting, there was a woman named Linda Shelley, and maybe Geraldine would like to take a look at her research. It's amazing. She also said that the Mayans revered Orion. They considered him the father figure. And one side, they have the Pleiades and Orion, as I was showing earlier. The other side of the Milky Way, interesting, they have Alpha Draconis and Ursa.
The dragon sign,
So you have the dragon and the bear.
the lower spiral.
We kind of hear those names.
So
from
simplify,
dragon.
we can take the upper path and the lower path. We can understand the quiet Pachamama, honor Mother Earth, and understand the ascension process of the ancient star to the development of Orion. Or we can take the lower spiral, think of negativity with the world media, condemn ourselves as being insufficient, and ignore the revelatory knowledge that's on our doorstep. I believe this is the greatest time to be alive. We're very close to contact with cosmic intelligence, which will help us make this shift that's necessary. We can no longer sustain ourselves with plastic civilization. And our scientists must make way for statesmen and for social scientists and thinkers of a positive future.
And the Egyptians actually wrote that the soul of Pharaoh would go towards Orion. Why was Orion significant? Well, in a certain sense, it becomes a type of vortex area. Like you have a pyramid coming down, pyramid going up, and Dr. Tech believes also that it's really a vortex to other dimensional realms. And guess what? We're in the Orion arm of the Milky Way. It's really not that
That
far.
wasn't known in 1973. So I had over, I would say, 90 scientific theorems published in 73 that have come to pass, including the rapid melting of the North and South Pole. And this illustration by my wife, Dr. Desiree, shows the human figure that's a cosmic creation across space and time, suggesting that the reason so many cultures, the South African, indigenous peoples in India and Far East, even the islands of the Pacific, and of course, North and South America, all have their major temples aligned with the belt system of Orion.
Or at least with some aspects.
Even what we found recently in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, going back 15,000 years. So this was the yardstick for a much larger cosmology, that we were in a living universe. We were but one species of hundreds of species. And if we decided to crucify ourselves in space and time, we would be an underling because we would miss the lessons of what Mother Heaven is teaching us.
Right, Linda Shelley, who is my scholar, also looked at this lower triangle. She said, one of the lines here was what really the Mayans themselves were looking at. But nevertheless, it was Orion. Let's go to the next slide.
Here I am in Egypt with my colleagues using what is called ground penetrating radar. The radar can be pulled under the earth down 20 meters, 30 meters plus. We're looking at the Great Pyramids of Egypt to find if there was missing rooms that we have records as to the earlier history, because so much of world history revolves around the pyramids. Western civilization, the majority of physical teachings handed down by Pythagoras, Homer, Herodotus, were all Greek thinkers going to Egypt for the lessons. In fact, we were told in the Coptic text of early Christians, Egypt was the home of the gods. The gods would come down from Orion and they left these pyramids behind. Well, people consider this, again, so much a negative mythology until our research with others from Germany, from France, from Switzerland, and of course Russia, were able to bring together the actual educational tools to probe.
Right, so this is Dr. attacking the tomb of Osiris. We were one of the founders with the shore expedition of the tomb. It's actually 97. There was a unique alignment between the Sphinx and the last two larger pyramids to the tomb of Osiris. And that tomb name was given by Zahi Hawass because it's so far down. It's like 100 feet underneath the ground.
So what did we find underground? We found a very elaborate water system.
Yeah.
Like
Find water.
Water
is everywhere, and water just flows up.
In fact, we found a whole hydraulic system where water would be taken in from the Red Sea and the Nile and brought and recycled.
Right, and we have a recent book called Keys of Industrial Complex, which actually talks about why we think water was used. It's not only ritual, not only the cleansing, the baptism, but also saltwater batteries, because there was salt water in some of these areas, and solar can make hydrogen gas, which could be used.
So we're going too fast. We're going too fast. The bottom line here is that the Egyptians had ways of showing us how we could create out of the desert a hydraulic system of survival. The Egyptians showed us, and this is your work, how hydrogen can be produced from the interplay of salt water and fresh water. The Egyptians showed us how we could use solar batteries before the battery effect was discovered. The Egyptians showed us a star map that suggests a probable home where our cosmic visitors have come from, and will return to the scene of human experiment.
And just to add in, the running with lithium-ion batteries is now saltwater batteries, often called,
So when I was testing the ancient Hebrew, Aramaic, Sanskrit vibrations inside the Great Pyramid, suddenly it lit up. This is a real picture. The Egyptian guards were confused, they became afraid, but we had Egyptian authorities with us at the time. So showing this is one example of what happened in Tula in Mexico many years later. That under certain conditions, acoustical physics can be used to pulsate energy through sacred geometry in such a way as to demonstrate minor matter or a higher physics of consciousness. Now we're at a time in world history where we can apply these lessons from archaeological past as well as scientific futures. And that's why we formed the Academy for Future Science, which has a base here in Sedona. And what is consciousness? What is future science? Science guided by consciousness. It is the ability to accelerate consciousness and to seek the connection with all humanity. This is what we call the gathering of the tribes. Mindahi was called the 13 sacred areas that we have to respect. And people laugh at us who do not know science. And this is one of the maps
From the
we published
Keys of
in
Enoch.
1973. It shows the accuracy of those 12 areas. One in the area of Indonesia on the island of Forest is right in the year 2003. They found the small hobbits. The Rancias, as it is called.
The Mauritius, where there's actually 7 pyramids, no one knows why.
Versus islands in the Indian Ocean.
The director of line, okay, we're going to go for that. That's actually in Russia.
In Uzbekistan, we found this round circular city that was
Archaim.
astrologically based on a different star system.
It's called Archaim.
In southern Africa, we found the footprints of giants. Once we were here on the planet, when the air density or air pressure was different, plants and animals and humans grew to a higher height.
And we're actually the diet of Dr. Tech and I may be able to go together, and that is to the Azores. You wouldn't even know.
The Azores,
And they have pyramids in the
The
Azores.
pyramids are being found under the ocean, suggesting that we're dealing with intelligence, which is exemplified here at Tula of these giants in stone.
And
Beings.
Tula was the empire capital for the Toltecs, for
That's right.
Mindahi's
And
culture.
what's so important, Desiree,
Actually, I got it for the next
the
picture.
beings
Yeah.
here that I'm pointing at my little laser, you can't see this.
No, we'll go to the next.
They have the grid and tuning plates, what we would say in the biblical tradition,
Yeah, there we go.
represent a higher system of knowledge. It's vibrating the heart, it's vibrating the mind, it's activating a whole new view of reality.
So the last line that we were pointing out on the other slide was the Heiaus in Hawaii. And some of you maybe have visited that on Maui, especially it's great Heiau, and also on the main island.
Various parts of Hawaii. Hawaii is one of the 13 areas that we consider very important because of the sacred ceremonial structures that are there.
But one thing these guys have is, it's almost like Dr. Dick says, very in tune, like they had some sort of computer play. They're also holding certain types of, almost
Like laser guns.
Yeah, like laser guns.
Well, again, that's for anthropologists to figure out. What we're saying is the star visitors were much higher or greater in proportion, hence the mythologies of the giants. They were basically breeding a higher technology that wasn't understood but configured in the way of what we would call the symbol later picked up of the clans or the different ethnic and tribal traditions. Namely, the use of the sacred glyphs for a higher communication system. We would now call it the first phase of a extraterrestrial syntax.
And so, of course, this is all about grid points. There's that alignment between Egypt, between Mexico, between areas of the Orient, which we didn't have the time to really review, but many of you visited some of those
So if
places.
you were in a satellite looking down, you would see the world in terms of the energy points of the sacred, pretty much like this. It's a sacred template of paraphysical energies that can be tapped and used. In fact, the Russians making artificial pyramids through the genius of Dr. Alexander Golod has shown that these pyramids actually change the consciousness of people who live in the city pyramids, help crops grow much faster, and actually change the psyche of people who are psychologically imbalanced and disturbed.
Right, and he didn't even have a stone pyramid. He was making pyramids out of wood and fiberglass, and it is still effective for his studies. So next, and of course, we're coming back home around the globe, and everyone recognizes Sedona. This is a map in Dr. Hurtak's book, where Sedona is in one of these, we'll say,
Interconcentric circles here on the western portion of our country. The dove, known as La Paloma in Spanish, is returning. This is the dove that Einstein and even Tesla thought of in their contemplations, the dove of peace. This is the symbol of the New Testament of a baptism of light of a higher purpose or Christ in nature, not of forced theology, but one of enlightenment, one of higher teaching. This is the dove that we see in the tribal traditions all throughout the world that represent these great features in the sacred areas.
But these two are the landing places, we always said.
Places of contact off the Bermuda Triangle, off of Baja California,
Yeah.
areas also that are connected with the indigenous of Canada. The importance here is though is the head of the dove is in Mexico. And in that area where Mindahi comes from, it also is connected with Yucatan Peninsula where we've done the scientific information. So this map has held up over the last 49 years.
And we believe a lot of the ancient information will come out of this area, and of course, a
We
lot of the
believe that
science as
these
well.
concentric circles will be areas of major contact if and when cosmic intelligence steps aboard the planet at the end of the present cycle, which is out of sync with Mother Earth, Mother Nature, or we would call the divine feminine.
So final picture, I'm not sure, okay.
Final picture is from the great artist, Mel Lyon, who works with us. And this is one of his illustrations of the return of the dove. And really the covenant of the butterflies, and we would call the beautification of Mother Earth as we see the refinements of nature under a multi-dimensional perspective.
But it's really who we are as we start developing our own self to be in contact with the transformation that everyone's going through, to be in contact with the heavens.
So putting this together, when we begin to think in technicolor, not black and white, when we begin to use our heartbeat to see the unity of all humanity, and not just for the few, when we begin to work with sacred geometry, seeing how the geometries of the indigenous cultures link up with the refinements of music and mathematics, our body becomes a temple of understanding. We are the capstone, or the 13th tribe, the tribe of peace, that brings together all of the other components, the 12 races or divisions of humanity, called in scripture the tribes of Israel, actually indicate poetically a type of spiritual Israel for those who are enlightened or achieve self-realization of a higher love that surpasses the dogma, the subjugation, and the repression of the free world.
So if we can just say this expression 7 times, Om, Aum, Uma, it's really for the world soul coming together and us understanding our contact with, we'll say, higher dimensions of reality and why we are here
The
now.
Om is the Sanskrit, the Egyptian, and the Uma, the Arabic and Tibetan is one. Om now.
Together.
Seven times for the 7 seals and the 7 chakras, which are the energy parts of our body.
Yeah, we're gonna give some time for
Yes.
complete discussion. I just want to let you know that we're Keys of Enoch.org, and we do have a base here.
I want to ask Darlene though to chant
Yeah.
when the indigenous, we're on indigenous property. Where's Darlene?
Can we get Darlene to do
Come
it?
please, program. You must understand the vibrations of what's
So go back.
Sedona.
Go back.
This is not an intellectual exercise. You have to rediscover your body as the musical instrument. And when you begin to tone anthems or sacred language, then you enter into a higher vibratory level of what is called the temple of understanding.
Yeah.
You begin to understand how all life is vibrations. I'm sorry I have to re-emphasize this by raising my voice, because acoustics in this room are going to emphasize the importance of while the sound chambers known as the pyramids in Mexico were built, why the sound chambers in Egypt were built, and why the sound chambers include the gathering places here in Sedona. So without further ado, I ask Arlene, working with the Lakota to come forth and to lead us and the very special Lakota's song and hymn. If you wish to close your eyes, feel the white dove over your head. Feel the dove from the east meeting with the dove of the west. The Lafaluma, the dove of the north, meeting with the Lafaluma of the south. As the four doves come together, they form a trinity with the eagle and the condor. They bring the missing piece of the capstone of vibration, so that myth becomes the divine science. The divine science becomes the music of the heart. And so we begin.
We are
I'm happy to be with you, and just I want to say one thing. Without vibrations of the heart, life is purposeless. We have tons and tons of documents collected by scholars and environments. But unless you have people who really want to help humanity from the heart, it's all smoke. So we must rededicate ourselves, and Sedona is a wonderful place. So we're happy that you have moved here. Sonia from Canada has moved here. Many of our friends from the east and west coast have moved here. Miracles, I say unto you, will happen because under mountain. The others will be here. The Hopis and their prophecy will be respected because that is in sync with the higher mystical interpretation of Judeo-Christian mystical theology. That we are here to help brothers and sisters by becoming the temple of spirit, the temple of understanding, the temple of divine love in human form. Thank you.
Wonderful. And we'll talk more about that during the panel and the Q&A section that we're saving for the end. But right now, I've invited Sonia to continue to elevate the vibration that we brought into the room. So I'd ask you all to remain in that deep space as we listen to this beautiful song here that is of vibratory nature, and I believe is also a very old, 150-year-old. Yes, okay, please. now that we have this room at a vibratory rate, as Judy mentioned, at the level of the heart, connecting through the higher spirit, I'd like to ask the four doctors to take a seat. We're going to have a panel discussion now about what we've just seen. I'd like to let you all know that we have seated in front of us an extremely educated panel. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we have about 8 PhDs amongst 4 people, give or take. Without getting into the details, I'd like to begin with Mindahi, and with the work that you're doing, could you please talk about the ancient understanding of the Mother Earth through the indigenous perspective, but at the same time connecting it in to the modern context, as Dr. Hurtak have just demonstrated?
Thank you for sharing this wonderful day, and it's always honor and privilege to be with you, together with my wife. We have been in several places together, but not alone, as I wish. So this is a wonderful opportunity to be here. So for the beginning, what we bring is honoring the spirit, is honoring the master. And we believe that there is a reason that we were given. That was not the goal. There is a reason that we were given this opportunity for men, women, or us. We were born. There are a reason to bring beauty to this world and teachings. So Mother Earth is teaching us. Is speaking us, and it's crying. And Mother Earth is telling us how to behave. So what we're bringing is to strengthen families. It's very important. We cannot have world with enough strength, enough capacity to really face the complex problems that we are facing without simple things, caring for the family and the community. And when I say the family, it's not the brothers and sisters, you're the brothers and sisters, or the father and the mother. It's the animals that we are for. It are the trees, they are family. It's the mountain that is teaching us our personalities. That's the root. Mother Earth is telling us. In some places, we have these spiritual authorities that we call entities or deities that dwell in the volcanoes, in the mountains, and they are alive. They have a spirit. For some people, they say, even today, that the rocks, they don't have life. Thanks to the rocks, we're here. Because of their energy that they provide to us. And we don't have the capacity to see how they move, but they move. And they are composed at the sacred level that they are composed. We as human beings, we are the reflections of those sacred elements. We have water in our bodies, we have fire, we have wind, and we have oil. The food that we eat is also who we are. And that's beautiful because if we really think about Mother Earth, any place around our Earth that is not touched by humans in a bad way, but is touched by humans in a good way, therefore we want to find beauty on it. And that's in between the spirit and the matter. So for us, it's very important to observe how Mother Earth speaks, together with the Grandma Moon. So for today, we need to be very attentive to the secrets, but also to the sunset and to the sunrise and to the meeting. Just stop your whatever you're doing and almost life. Connect. They're very simple things. And they are going to give you a lot of energy, a lot of fuel for the spirit. Sometimes we are confused. Confused. Why we are here? Why we came to this world? Well, we know that there is a reason, and the reason is that we must come together. Today, the governments are not going to stop the problem. You're from the wrong way. Corporations, even this. People who are breathing, they are not going to solve the situation. So people who are trying to raise consciousness and connect with nature and spirit, we are the ones who want to come together. Even with all that are breathing, they have to change. A nation they have to come together as well. There's no other way. We want to come together, all of us, whether we like it or not. That this is the time. A Mother Earth is telling us, wake up. Other time. We need to think beyond development. We need to improve what is wrong. Begin again. And learn our original process, how to live from the me to the we. That's the only way we can live. That's the only way we can survive. Very, very difficult times are coming as we have witnesses. We must be prepared. Thank you.
Thank you, Mother. In confirmation, the word is used throughout Americas for Mother Earth. Two words meaning earth and animation, or the vitality of getting the earth. So we're at this stage of realizing that the earth itself is teaching us lessons. And one of these lessons will be that sustainability and survival will go together if they're harmonized. Those who see positive futures, those who are not put back to negative thinking. So that's why we're together. We believe that science, education, and what we will call the spiritual dimension can come together, not in the old-fashioned sense of fear, damnation, and doom, but in the sense of vitality and reconnection with the star cultures, or star nations. So that's echo wherever we go, and I'm proud to represent the Chavanti peoples of Brazil. Spheres of light have come into the villages, and they have said the earth is going to change. And those that will suffer most will cling to materialism at the expense of their spiritual dimension. We will call it the higher consciousness.
Geraldine, thank you, JJ. Geraldine, your extraordinary work in the film talks about the time we're in right now. And this is May the 3rd, 2022. And your work indicates that we are in another 4-year period in this 13-year transition between the 13th Baktun, which I didn't realize was 500 and 5,120 year cycle, coming to an end now, and the beginning of the next cycle, how long that would be. We're talking about Mother Earth, the sacred feminine. I'd like for you and Desiree to both talk a little bit about what that means to you in your work as women, and how that this period that we're in now, we must pay attention to this.
Thank you for that question, because indeed Mother Earth, in the creation story, on that day for how it Kunku, the Orion, represented by the turtle, was right there at midnight. And so it was that the turtle, Yashak is her name, meaning the green turtle, manifested in the primordial waters. And it was then on her back that the 3 stones of the hearth were placed in a triangular configuration, where the middle point was looking to the west, and so the angle of this isosceles triangle opened to the east. Why? Because that is the very feminine way, and we're a cave way of representing the feminine, opening up to the fertilizing ray from the east coming in every morning. So this configuration of the hearth, receiving that initial ray, was what started the fire, and from that, then family could start to come together, and this feminine and masculine force, so to generate life and generations to come, but always on top of the Mother Earth turtle that the Maya do have, and they have represented her in many ways, in rock form, in small ritual places, even in Chichen Itza, there's the little Tula place, which is not open to the public, but there's a beautiful turtle ritual rock over there, and she's looking towards the west to that Orion configuration in July. And so all these forces, receiving the waters from July time, keep coming back again and again, because that's where life begins. So here we are in time when the Pleiades are manifesting on May 3 as the sun is setting, which is about now, and they are only now and for this 13th sun cycle being visible on the west because this is the opening of the feminine era. Priorly, when the Olmec started the accounting, the Pleiades were on May 3rd in the east sky, which is the masculine side. So that era is over, and now we're starting into the feminine era where Pleiades has a feminine role to play. Pleiades is considered to be the dwelling place of the initial couple. And so now this couple is taking in that feminine aspect of itself, so to ensure the continuation of life.
Yeah, I find that very fascinating. Of course, I think from a lot of the Native American, locally indigenous people here, that this entire planet is a turtle island, and some people acknowledge, but I like the fact that you're saying how that comes about really by this turtle energy that really did manifest. But also, I agree, and we have friends of ours here from the Australia, and they talked about some of the cultures there acknowledging and recognizing the Pleiades also. So the Pleiades is not just local. I mean, even the Aboriginals, and they can kind of trace their history. I don't know about every legend back 50,000 years ago to the Pleiades as being a key location. Just a few of the tribes there that talk about it. And sadly, we really do all hope that more of the Hopi and the Navajo and the Zuni start getting back into understanding this, which I think they have that information. In fact, we've done studies that have, some of them actually came from Mexico, because when Mexico had that, we'll say the Mayan or the Aztec had that major problem with water, they came. So some of them literally came into what we consider now this country, and some of the legends have continued.
So the Hopi had major irrigation systems in southern Arizona. We have found a vast array of underground hydraulic systems in Egypt. We're going to publish and find that details. We know that in Peru there were vast water systems that were exquisite, and in Central Asia and China, Western China, there were hydraulic systems that ran for at least close to 1,000 kilometers. This was greater than the building of the Great Wall of China because it was an engineering system that allowed the original peoples of Central Asia to migrate with stories of higher knowledge,
But
at least as well as in Southeast Asia.
But this is really, we are living on Mother Earth, and we all need to be more aware, as Mindahi said, about her cycles, what we're doing, all of that connection. We're all environmentalists, basically sitting up here saying, you know, things are not right. We're all here in Sedona because people also said, you know, this is a better place to be, but we still have to be the caretakers and the caregivers.
Beings between 60 and 80% water. Mother Earth feeds us the symbolism and the social reality and the environment impact of what happens without water. So all of these great civilizations were masters in water.
Indeed, we are the water planet. I'd like to put our attention just for a moment to the conversation of the Earth is seen as a turtle swimming on its axis through the solar system by many cultures, and that as the sun and the moon and the Earth are cyclical, and that the moon goes around the Earth in its cycle once every 30 days, and as the Earth goes around its cycle of the sun once every 365 years, also too does the sun go around its center point once every 225 to 250 million years. And in fact, through the center of the Milky Way galaxy. And the last time we were here was around the end of the Permian. That was a very, very big extinction event. So we need to be aware of what time it is, in my view, and that's one of the reasons I think that each of these brilliant presenters tonight have been focused on time. So I'd like to move into an engagement piece now with the folks that have come here. And I want to start with Alan because he had a question for Geraldine, as I recall.
I did.
And use our remaining time before we conclude. And I would suggest, if it's appropriate, that we conclude by a ceremonial lighting of the fire before we depart at 7:30, if that works with you. Okay. It'll be brief, but I want to conclude. Okay. Yes, here you go.
Okay. Okay.
And then if you can just pass it to the next after.
All right. Thank you. Nice to be here in this beautiful company, the sacred company, representative of the world. And the question is first to Geraldine, but to everyone. You said we're in the 14th Baktun. And we are 9 years into what, a 5,000 year? But you look a little hesitant about the future of humanity as we're going. It's a question I'm putting out to everyone about the future of humanity. But talk about the Mayan prediction of the Baktuns and what we need to do, and then everyone else can talk about where we are as a planetary civilization. Thank you.
So, you know, all predictions, I think, have conditioning. The statement is with a condition. So if we do this, then the outcome will be that. If we do some other thing by free will, then who knows what the outcome will be, or the outcome will be quite a disaster. So the condition is that when a cycle comes to a closing, so there's many cycles. There's the Ha cycle, so that's the 365-year cycle. And then there's the next cycle, which is 20 tuns, almost 20 years. And there's another cycle, which is 400 tuns. So that's a Baktun. Okay, so let's start with the little one, and that is just a fractal of the bigger one. What needs to be done by every family, talking about family, is that before the closing of the year cycle, we need to do some kind of ceremony, and the ceremony that is appearing in one of the ancient Maya books is we need to put our most intimate secrets about what we did wrong in a little cup. Yes? And we are, with that, like, acknowledging that we misbehaved and that we will do better next year. So we need to do that now. We have 13 years to be doing that. That's a lot that I was telling you we need to undo. All this decolonizing movement is about that. There's a lot that we need to go back to, the basic principles of just living in harmony. I mean, it's simple to maintain a partnership as a couple. It's simple to be mother and father. It's simple to be, you know, good participants in an extended family, to take care of the hearth of the fire. You know, every day continue to keep those ashes so that they will light the new fire early in the morning, and to keep that for 360 days, and then let the heart rest, clean it up, and give it blessings to begin again. Just doing that keeping the family around, going to ask for the rain and putting the seed when it is time, just that microcosm of getting everything right, would already, if we did that, would already put it on the right track. So that condition would be in our favor so that the outcome would be much better. And every single day, we have the choice to go over what we're about to do and become engaged in, and ask ourselves, is this going to be for the benefit of life or not?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we go to the next question, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, we were talking about family and parents. There's an extraordinary member of Mindahi and Geraldine's family that I would like to mention, and that's their daughter Shia, and she represents the 20-year-old generation, or the ones who now inherit the world. And so Shia has become quite prominent in the last few years globally, addressing the world's leaders at the United Nations, as well as Joe Biden invited her to address the world leaders 1 year ago, including the climate summit that was virtually held with on Earth Day with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping and many others. And then she spoke about her view of the world and how we, so please, I would like, before we move on to, if you could just mention the significance of your coming here to the United States 5 years ago, and Shia's explosion onto the world scene, but also how that comes through the work we've been discussing here tonight.
I can say that I'm very proud to be father of CJ, but together with Geraldine, because there's a prophecy as well that there were going to be children that were going to bring this attention and this wisdom to the elders. And we are witnessing those times. There's a massive movement around the world from the young. And I see how the intelligence is not enough, and also the heart and the spirit has to be connected to the intelligence. So we have this opportunity to be here, witnessing those times, and but I think Mother Earth is speaking, and I understand that she is highly intelligent, but also what we have provided to her is this love for Mother Earth, love for life. And that's what she brings. This message that is in connection with nature, is in connection with the responsibility that we have, how they see the future, how they see that what is going to happen with the children that are coming. Because our wisdom, we don't just think what kind of work we are delivering to the children as intergenerational equity. But it's also the other way around. What kind of children we are delivering to this planet, to Mother Earth. So I think this is very important. The philosophy and also the cosmovision that we have, that we can share and we can recover as human beings. And I think that's the time. And we were witnessing these times. But we have to act. So that's the reason we are working around the unification process. And the unification process tells us that we need to come together and work together, feel together, and act together. Even if sometimes we don't like the other one, or the here and there, but we must follow what is needed. So again, it's a voice of many. It's a voice of Mother Earth. It's a voice of it's a voice of Father God. The word, I sometimes I see her how she cries. And it's what I feel when Mother Earth, when there is a bit of oil in the sea, I can see, because when I saw those fishes that were dying by the Lego River, I was crying, and Mother Earth was crying. When there is an extinction of a language, when there is an extinction of species, I'm part of the planet.
In summary, we must seek a culture of life rather than a culture of death. Our media has been negative oriented, and young people have lost the vision of the future. This is why through the internet now, through our platforms of education that we're putting together, we can reach literally tens of millions of people. Desiree and I just 2 people, reached over 12 million people, because we believe that life goes on. Evolution doesn't stop with Mother Earth. As a matter of fact, we have had high encounters with cosmic intelligence.
Right, and I just wanted to add, well, what they've done for Xie, by the way, spell it Xiye, if you're gonna go look her up. We are also, all of us need to empower ourselves, empower others to make a difference. And that empowerment can also come, I think it's very important. I always say, like that fire last year that was coming really close to Sedona, a lot of people were getting very worried and nervous about it. I mean, put prayers out, put energy out to move it away. You know, empower yourself to also work with Mother Nature.
Her physical dimension of science is much more powerful than people think.
Geraldine and I were talking earlier today when we were walking some of the sacred sites about the work he's done with even bringing in rain, right? So we can do that. And I think that's the most important thing, is never feel, disempowered. Always feel empowered. That's what they've done for their child, who now talks to the president.
So the power of meditation, the power of prayer, the power of sacred music is more powerful than all the howitzers and atomic bombs. If we can generate enough people, just need to, Helen Santana was working with us, it's just 1% of young people raising their vibrations.
Since we're in such a drought, just talk a little bit about the rain the work of the rain that you brought together. How do you feel it today? Now you
And also, if you'd like to address the Xie piece.
Yes, so Xie actually means triple rain. And she found her consciousness so much that it can actually start to drizzle in New York City yesterday before she went into the Met Gala. It was drizzling all the time. But yes, indeed, the connection to the beings and entities and deities and greater consciousness around rain and rain givers and makers actually begins in these breathing holes that we were told were closed today in Sedona. These breathing caves, when you go and offer songs, so that the sound energy and all this love coming from your heart and all these offerings, all these tamales and fruit and whatever and seeds and the chia seeds as well. All these payments that come and are presented to this consciousness and dwelling caregiver of this breathing hole, cave, cavern, then actually the clouds will begin to blow out. And those clouds and that mist will connect with the clouds up above. And that's how, when the wave and rain really comes down. And yeah, the lot of the fourth of those make rain is contagious. So we have the opportunity to join one of these rain nature people in good with full respect and open heart, then we'll participate in the rainmaking.
And I know in Africa also, there's a whole consciousness that certain weather patterns are based on the consciousness of the people living there. So that's also important to understand. So there's just a lot of things to start thinking about when we get in touch with nature and really try to help Mother Nature.
Well, as Sylvia Earle points out, our esteemed friend and board member, that this should be really called Mother Ocean. It is 71% water here, our bodies, and that the hydrological cycles have been so disrupted now, from the Amazon to the African Great Rainforest, all over the planet, that the water, there's just as much water as there was in the beginning. It just moves into different places. And so the entities that Mindahi is referencing, and Geraldine and JJ and Desiree, it's all about the water. And where is the water? And how is the water working? So we are now at almost the conclusion of our time, and I know that we have burning questions throughout the room. And unfortunately, we don't have time to really open it up to a Q&A but I would invite you all to come out with us to conclude this amazing day. It's only 2.5 hours. Unfortunately, there's rules that the city has about this venue, and we have to be gone by 7:30 on our way. 8 o'clock is the hard stop to be out. And I would ask you all, by the way, when we leave, to leave quietly. This is a neighborhood of quiet families. And but I would like to actually have a concluding remark from each one of our panelists before we end.
Go ahead, you start.
Well, we're in a turbulent time, but each of us should seek a culture of peace in life, not a culture of death. So television channels, internet, broadcasts, or satellites from, we say, questionable sources that preach death, hatred, negativity, just turn off with a higher vibration. This is the time to reclaim your future, because those who survive this coming change will enter into what I call the fifth dimension of consciousness of light, true science, and true spirituality. Be the light.
Right, and every moment is a moment of choice. And it's up to us to choose to be in the light all the time, working with the light, putting our energies towards what makes life more beautiful and not the ego self. So let's try to work on that. I know, as we're saying, here's 2 couples sitting here. It's not easy always to share, work, be together, but this is what we can do. We can flourish by understanding each other from their perspective. We call it the overview effect. See it from outside of yourself, see that energy coming in, and see how you can help to improve your environment. And let's keep all of the planet going strong.
Before I give Mindahi and Geraldine the last word, my concluding remarks are: we have created and inaugurated the Sedona Institute here tonight, and we are dedicated to helping the creation of the third mandate, which is the implementation of the 13 houses of original thought. And I, for one, would like to place one here in this community of Sedona. So I'm going to ask each and every one of you to think about how you could contribute to such an endeavor. So that's for me, and please.
Love. Give love, receive love, be always with an open heart and a big, generous smile. Dance, sing, celebrate life, and put all that energy in seeds so that you will be feeding off of that love.
I just want to bring attention to reciprocity. We always think about just taking and that's it. We need to give back. And now we need to give back not just for lives, but for our ancestors that took a lot. So this is the time to begin paying back. Because this higher consciousness, this higher intelligent being that is Mother Earth knows us all. And we think that we are the ones who are intelligent. We are not so intelligent. So this is about, not just about humans. This is about each other being that is protecting us, giving us so much. And we are grateful to be here in this world because we are going to have also that energy to evolve to that dimension. We have, we cannot do it at all. So reciprocity is not a mandate. That's totally relevant to Mother Earth. But what reciprocity among us with others. And you don't wait that people pay back to you. It's going to come to another and pray. So that's the beautiful dance of life. So always think about reciprocity. Thank you.
Beautiful. So I'd like to thank each of you for being here tonight and presenting. And how about one more round of applause for the presentation? Now I'd like everybody to join us outside around the fire for a final prayer before we depart back into our lives. We take this wisdom with us and play it forward to the next place. Let's not forget how important that is to take this energy and carry it forward like the fire itself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.